Hello, I am Kenny Eckstein-Schoemann, and I am a senior in fine arts with a concentration in painting and drawing. Today, I am interviewing Bret Iwin. What a pleasure! It's a pleasure to interview you. Thank you for joining.
Oh, Kenny, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Oh, you're welcome. So I'm going to ask you these 10 questions.
Okay.
The first question is your artistic beginnings. Like, how did your journey as a visual artist begin? Like, were there any pivotal moments that steered you towards this path?
My artistic beginnings really they start with just being a kid who was fascinated by, the marks that were made with a pencil or a crayon. I just thought it was so fascinating. And there's something very appealing about taking a blank piece of paper and being able to create on it. Very early on, I was inspired and loved cartoons, especially Disney cartoons, like Mickey Mouse cartoons. And so some of my earliest memories are watching cartoons, pausing them, and then drawing the characters that I saw. Me and my dad would do that. And I think that was very formative for me, because even though some would say cartoons are a very commercial form of art, it was appealing to a kid, and I recognized a lot of artistic qualities in those early Walt Disney cartoons that were different than what I was seeing on, like, let's say, Saturday morning cartoons. So I really kind of focused on the Walt Disney cartoons, and I think that's kind of the origin of most of my artistic interest.
That's very fascinating. Like, it always is. When you're younger, that's usually the time when you start becoming fascinated. That's how I got into art at first. Like, when I was younger, I loved watching Disney movies and cartoons and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, so I can relate to what you said.
Okay, that's fantastic. Yeah, they're very appealing, aren't they?
No, they are.
Yeah.
No, they are. And then the second question, inspirational sources.
Okay.
What are your primary sources of inspiration? Are there any artists, movements, or themes that particularly influence your work?
There are a lot of different artistic genres that have influenced me over the years. And the inspiration continues to expand in a way. The older I get and the more I see and I experience, the more artistic inspiration I gain. But I will say, I think I mentioned the early Walt Disney classics. That was a huge jumping off point for me. But as I got older and as I went to art school, I really became fascinated with artists who were creating around the turn of the century. There was a whole artistic movement with plein air painting, kind of getting away from the Renaissance, very tight, refined school of thought when it came to painting, and going to a more interpretive, artistic, focusing on brush strokes and color palettes with Degas and Van Gogh and Monet. So that's always been very inspirational, appealing to me, as well as illustrators like Sargent, J.C. Leyendecker, Norman Rockwell, these guys who are taking a lot of those same principles of early Renaissance art, but in almost in a way combining them with the artistic movement of Impressionism, and that they were allowing themselves to explore these more refined characterizations or drawing techniques with a little looser color palette and looser brush strokes. So for me, I've always been inspired by anything that shows the hand of the artist, and I think those genres kind of are a really good example of that. You see how the artist worked.
No, very fascinating. No, it is important. Like, it is important to look to our past for inspiration for the future.
Yeah, always.
And then the third question, artistic process. Can you walk us through your final artistic process from the initial concept to the final piece?
Yeah, that, again, I talked about constantly evolving and what was inspiring me. I think my artistic process is constantly evolving as well. Anymore, a lot of professional artists are working digitally, which was something that when I went to school, it wasn't really prominent at the time. I only had one semester of digital illustration. And anymore, predominantly I'm working digitally, whether I'm doing graphic design or even illustration. Most of the stuff is started with still starting from a sketch, focusing on the fundamentals of concept sketch and composition, then value studies as well, moving into color, that's all a similar process, but just done digitally now. But at the same time, I have not lost my interest in the traditional media. I mentioned plein air painting. That's a passion of mine still. So and that's literally involving taking your canvas and paints out into the wild, setting up your easel, and painting from nature. And so that artistic process is slightly different in that you're really working off of the impromptu inspiration of the moment and the setting. So you don't necessarily have the time to work from composition sketch to color study, to value studies to color studies, as you would with an illustration. But I appreciate that process because I can be impatient at times. I don't know about you, but as an artist, oftentimes I can see what I want the final version to look like, and I have to go through those steps to get there. And what I find when I'm doing plein air painting is that I can kind of instinctually move through that process a lot quicker. And so that brings me a lot of joy to kind of see that finished art, or see what I'm imagining in my mind come to life a lot sooner when I'm just there in the moment painting from nature.
Very interesting, very interesting evolution of your craft.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so the fourth question, materials and techniques. What are your favorite materials and techniques, and why? Are there any that you're eager to explore?
Well, you know what is funny is I was kind of adverse to digital illustration and art early on. I just didn't think it was as appealing to me, but it's interesting to see how technology has evolved to create product and software that almost emulates traditional artwork with no distinction between them. So I have learned and grown to appreciate that a lot more than I did early on. And I'm still interested in learning. I know that I've only tapped into the tip of the iceberg, as it were, with that technology. So I'm interested in exploring that a bit more. But beyond that, I really love any time when it comes to having a paid job and I have a timeline, I defer and rely on digital tools to get me there. But when it's something that I'm working on for myself and it's truly a passion project, I still like to get my hands dirty. I want to feel the resistance of the paintbrush against the canvas. I want to feel the charcoals or the pastels as they hit the board or the paper. So that's the stuff that really appeals to me. And I think, even though I've had some successes working in all those media, I don't think anyone's ever truly an expert. And so what's appealing to me is to just keep trying and keep pushing myself. To see what comes out. A lot of times I'll complete a painting and I'm really proud of it, but then I see another artist's work and I recognize something in their work that I want to put into my own, and so then I'm challenged to kind of take what I've seen and apply it to my own stuff. So yeah, I think my techniques and my media and the things that are appealing to me are constantly evolving as well.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Very good. In the fifth question, evolution of style. How has your artistic style evolved over the years? Are there specific events or experiences that catalyze changes in your approach?
That's a really good question. I think it's funny. It's almost better for someone to tell an artist what their style is than sometimes for an artist to be able to articulate their own style, because you're so involved in it and it's so personal. I don't think we recognize all the ways that we distinguish ourselves from others necessarily. It's just kind of it's who you are. You're just putting yourself into your artwork. The longer I've done it, I think the more I've been able to identify a finished look that I think is maybe more identifiable as a Bret Iwin style. I've been heavily inspired by posterized art lately, so going back to art that was created in the 40s and 50s and 60s even, with screen printing and limited color palettes, and that whole process lent itself to a very stylized and graphic look, which I've had great success with lately in doing some artwork for Disney actually, and people seem to respond very well to that, so that styling I think is starting to be identified with me. But knowing myself and knowing the artwork that and the wide variety of things I like to work on, it's hard for me to identify one particular style. But I would say, yeah, probably the graphic poster art is something that's been more notably me. In terms of a pivotal moment, I don't know that there was necessarily a moment when I was able to recognize this is my style. I think over time, when I've been able to look back retrospectively and see what pieces were more successful than others, then I've been able to identify perhaps those stylings or techniques better identify as a personal style for myself.
Very good. Very interesting.
Thank you.
This next question. Signature pieces. Out of all the pieces you've created, is there one that you feel the most proud of or believe represents you as an artist? If so, can you share the story behind it?
Absolutely. Well, it's good timing for this interview because I just completed Mickey Mouse's 95th anniversary portrait. And I think that up to date, that is one of my proudest pieces and accomplishments because mentioning early influences, as a kid, I used to go through art books all the time that had Disney artwork, and of particular interest were these portraits that were done of Mickey Mouse throughout the years, and I used to think, oh wow, it must be so exciting to have the honor of doing that. So when I was asked, it almost didn't feel real, but I just completed that, and I combined kind of all the elements you've asked me about today, my favorite stylings, and using influences of some of those turn-of-the-century artists that I mentioned earlier, and then incorporating just different techniques I've learned over the years through experimenting. I really took my time to create a piece that was slightly different than anything I'd done before, and although, as I'm sure you know, as an artist, you never quite feel like your pieces are finished, I had to turn it in and had to give it over to Disney, and the feedback I've received so far has been so glowing that I think it's a success, and I'm very proud of it. So,
no, it's very exciting.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's very exciting getting to for you to get to work on the 100th anniversary piece.
Yeah,
it must be an honor.
Absolutely, it's a milestone moment. Yeah, that's hard to believe.
Okay, so the 7th question.
Okay.
What are some challenges you faced in your career, and how have you overcome them?
I think we're all faced with challenges constantly, sometimes whether we know it or not. Professionally, I think, I've had some moments where maybe a particular project didn't come as easily to me as I would have hoped it to be. Well, one instance is I just completed a children's book, and even though it was a concept that I helped originate, once I started getting into the execution phase, I found it pretty challenging to execute the artwork in a way that I had imagined it to be. So that took some time, and in those moments, I think it's important to step back a bit, reevaluate what you're struggling with, and then just kind of have a fresh start. And so that's what I find myself doing often. Yeah. But I think for an artist, challenges are very commonplace because, again, we're so tied to the end product. What we're creating is such a personal endeavor and representation that inevitably we're going to get hung up on some stuff. So thankfully I don't think I've had any catastrophic challenges along the way, but the biggest one is probably imposter syndrome. I don't think I've ever felt deserving or having achieved what I imagined I would have by this point in my career, but all my friends and family seem to think otherwise, so I tend to listen to them.
They're right.
Yeah.
But you're welcome. But I know that feeling, not feeling like you're quite where you need to be.
Yeah.
I'm constantly feeling that way. How do I get where I would want to be with my artwork? So I understand completely.
Yeah. I think a lot of us artists can relate to that, for sure.
Definitely. Question 8, art's purpose. What role do you believe art plays in society, and what message, if any, do you aim to convey through your work?
Wow. I think, the purpose of art is, there's so many levels to that. I think enjoyment is one that we could hope for. To evoke emotion is another. That could apply to two-dimensional artwork, three-dimensional artwork, fine art, but it can also apply to the arts in general when it comes to music and theater. But I think art and artists bring so much color to culture. I think it's a great way of reflecting moments in time. It's a great identifying factor of, you know, some of our different social groups' differences and what makes us unique. And so I think having the ability to showcase all of those things through art is so important. And sometimes, unfortunately, I think taken for granted, but you know, there's so much beauty there's so much beauty in the world, and then there's so much beauty that can be added to the world through different artistic practices. So it's, I think it's invaluable, truly.
No, it truly is. Question 9, future plans. Where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years? Are there any projects or collaborations or explorations you're particularly excited about?
Well, in 5 to 10 years, I see myself being older, which is not necessarily a fun thought. Gosh, I think I would, I'd like to maintain the momentum that I've built up. I've been a professional artist now for almost 20 years.
Oh, wow.
And so I feel like I've finally gotten to a place where all of that hard work and that schooling and life experiences is paying off now, to where I feel like I truly am a professional artist. So I hope that for the next 5 to 10 years, I can maintain that momentum, hopefully have some more exciting milestone moments like painting Mickey's portrait. But most importantly, I imagine myself having as much fun as possible and taking advantage of all the opportunities that come my way, and continuing to grow. I really am a big fan of growth, and I think that's due to curiosity, and so I want to maintain that curiosity that keeps me seeking and growing and challenging myself and learning new skills, and who knows, maybe a new art technique will come because of that. You never know.
What is the metaverse?
Yeah. Let's hope it's not AI.
Yeah, let's hope. Okay, so question 10, advice. What advice would you give to emerging visual artists trying to find their voice or place in the art world?
I think the biggest piece of advice I can offer is to stay vigilant and just, be open to everything around you, all your surroundings, including experiences, including other artists, architecture, music, theater, anything that you find appealing that kind of sparks joy for you, I think is so important to soak in and let all of those different things influence your visual art style. And I think sometimes we don't even realize it's happening, but you're definitely picking up different aspects that are motivating you. There's something that's resonating with you, and that's going to translate into a personal style or technique or even just subject matter. I think, when I was younger, I'm not sure I was as open to just being aware of the different opportunities as being presented with. And as I've gotten older, I find myself being more just aware of that, and then and being able to acknowledge the influence that it has on me. So stay open, stay curious. That's what I would say.
No, definitely. No, it is important to just be flexibility is important.
Mm-hmm. That's a great word, flexibility.
Mm-hmm. That's something that I'm still learning.
Mm-hmm. And you'll continue learning the rest of your life. That's awesome.
Well, it was nice interviewing you. Thank you again for joining the interview.
Of course, Kenny. Thank you so much. Thanks for the great questions.
Oh, you're welcome.